Thanks for joining us back here at Plain Living Homestead for a beginner sewing class. Today we're going to take a look at how to thread your sewing machine. Whether you've got a top load bobbin like this machine or a front load bobbin here, whether you've got a mechanical machine or a computerized machine. If you have an electronic sewing machine, this is the tutorial for you. All you're going to need is a spool of thread, an empty bobbin, and your machine with the power cord. Today I'm going to show you how to thread your machine, and part of that is learning all of the different parts of your sewing machine. We're going to look at two different styles of machines. The first one is a front load bobbin. You can see that it goes in to the front of the machine here. And then we'll also be looking at a top load bobbin machine where it drops in from the top. And most of the process is going to be the same, but when you actually get to the bobbin, there are a few steps that are slightly different for each machine. First, we're going to take a look at my front load bobbin machine. This is a Kenmore. They don't make them anymore. It's very similar to a Brother machine. It's all mechanical, which means it operates completely on these different knobs. There are no electronics or computers. Now it is electric, as in it has power, but there are no electronics built in here, and all of the controls are right here in these manual knobs. So let's start by identifying some of the parts on our machine. First, let's take a look here at the top. We've got our spool pins, and on this machine I've got two. They pop right out of the top. You only need to use one, so when I'm only sewing with a single thread or a single needle, I just use the one closest to the needle. This here is our bobbin winder. On my machine, when you push it to the right, it activates it, and that will spin to wind up the bobbin. When you push it to the left, it's deactivated. On some machines, this spins all the time, and on some machines, there is a separate button for that. These are my adjustment knobs, so this one determines my length, and this one determines which of these stitches that it does. This is a tension guide for the bobbin winder. So when I have thread here on this pin, I would wrap it around this guide and over to the bobbin. This is a thread guide, and you'll see here on the top of my machine that it's got arrows made into the casing. So we're going to start here on the spool. It's going to point this arrow to go this way across the machine over to the thread guide, and that's step number one, to hook my thread through that. I'm going to guide the thread down through the groove to step number two, which is to make a loop around that. Inside here are two tension discs, and when I run this number lower, the tension discs are going to press gently, and when I run this number higher, they're going to squeeze more tightly. Those two discs, when I put my presser foot down, they're going to clamp together onto the thread to make sure that the correct amount of thread is being pulled out every time it takes a stitch. So we've done 1, 2, and we're back up at the top. Step 3 is to wrap your thread around this and to fit it into the groove. This is called your take-up lever. Then down back through the groove, step 4 is to hook here in the thread guide above the needle. And then finally, we will thread the needle. I also want us to remember that this is called the presser foot. It pushes on the fabric so that there is enough pressure for the feed dogs to grab it. Let me take this off really quick. These little ridged pieces here, these are called feed dogs, and they pull the fabric into the machine. The amount that they pull the fabric is determined by your stitch length. So every time the needle goes down and back up and takes a stitch, these feed dogs are going to pull a set amount of fabric in, and that's determined by your stitch length in millimeters. So 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, etc. This part of your machine is referred to as the throat. It's how much work area you have between the needle and the body of your machine. This, when we pull off the storage compartment, this is called a free arm. People will refer to this as exposing the free arm. This is used for when you're sewing very tight areas like the cuff of a sleeve or pants or a very small item, that you can wrap it around that and be able to access that very easily. And then this machine is a front load bobbin, which means when I open this door here, the bobbin is going to load into the front of the machine. This piece here is a bobbin case. You'll see when we flip it around. A bobbin would sit in there, and then this piece right here fits onto the pin inside the machine. This piece here is a shuttle. It's the piece that the bobbin case slides onto when it's in the machine. And this piece actually rotates around the bobbin case. And this hook right here will pick up your top thread and interlock the bobbin thread with the top thread to create each stitch. So the bobbin is going to remain still while the shuttle rotates around it. On the right side of the machine, there is a wheel, and if you turn this, you'll see it manually moves the needle up and down. You'll see that there is no power. There's not even anything plugged into my machine right now. We always want to turn this counterclockwise or back towards ourselves when we're sitting at the machine. If you go back this way, it's going to run the machine backwards. It's going to mess up the timing, and if you have thread in the needle, it's really going to mess things up. Now, before we get started, there are just a couple things that you need to thread your machine. Of course, you're going to need a spool of thread. You're going to need a bobbin. We'll start with an empty one so that we can learn all the steps of how to wind it and prepare the machine. If you have a larger cone of thread like this type of thread has to unravel from the top. You see how it's wound and it comes off the top. In order to use one of these, you will need a thread lifter. And this simply allows you to take the thread, run it up through one of these loops so that it can come straight up off the spool, and then you'll be able to thread the machine from here to make sure that the thread unravels correctly. Before you thread your machine, there is one step that is of vital importance and will completely derail threading your machine if you forget to check this step. Somewhere on the back of your machine, there is some sort of lever that raises and lowers your presser foot. You'll see here that this is going up and down. When I put this presser foot down here, the tension discs inside my machine close together. If those tension discs are closed when you slide your thread through this groove, your thread will go off to the side instead of in between the discs, and you will not be able to put your upper thread under tension. So it's very important that you raise this presser foot before you guide your thread through the tension discs. As we thread our machine, typically we're going to keep the machine turned off so there's no power to it, just for safety so that we can avoid accidentally sewing over our finger or getting something caught as we thread the machine. But in order to wind our bobbin, we are going to have to turn the power on so that our bobbin winder can operate. So I'm going to flip this on. Now the first thing that I need to do is install my thread spool. So I'm going to unwind just a little bit. I'm going to slide this over my spool pin. And on my machine, it indicates that you wrap this clockwise around the tensioner so that it crisscrosses. I'm going to put my thread through this slit from the inside to the outside and then pull a little bit of that out. And then I'm going to put my bobbin on the bobbin winder and I'm going to snap it in until I hear that click. On my machine, I'm going to push that to the right to activate it, and then I'm going to gently press on my presser foot to begin the bobbin winding process. You'll see on this machine that my needle does move while the bobbin winder is activated. On newer machines, the needle typically does not operate. Once I get enough wound that I know that the thread is held on the bobbin, I like to snip this off so I don't have to hold it anymore. And I just snip it very close. And then I'm going to go ahead and wind this. Most machines have this automatic shut-off that will make it stop when the bobbin is full. I like to watch mine. I don't like for my bobbin to get all the way full because it tends to create problems once you install your bobbin in the machine. But I'm going to fill it most of the way up. I'm going to trim this here, and I'm going to take my bobbin off, and I'm going to set this aside for right now because we need to thread the top part of the machine down to the needle thread before we insert our bobbin. Now to thread the top of the machine, I am going to turn the power back off for safety reasons. I'm going to remove the thread from my tensioner, and then I'm going to turn my hand wheel until I see this take-up lever pop out the top of the machine. We can leave our thread here on the spool pin, and I like to pull out about 10 or 12 inches. And then as I thread the machine, I'm going to keep the tension here so that I don't just unravel a bunch of unnecessary thread. So step one is to go through the thread guide. Step 2 is down through this groove and to make a U around the bottom. Step 3 is to come up and around the take-up lever. So to the right side of the take-up lever, you're going to go all the way to the back, wrap it around to the left, and then pull it back towards the front. And when you do that, the thread is going to slip down into the little groove where it's supposed to sit. I'm going to pull it all the way down through this groove and then snap it into this thread guide here. And now we're ready to thread the needle. Now there are all kinds of fancy gadgets that help you thread the needle. I have found a couple of tricks that help me to thread the needle very easily every time. First, I'm going to take this thread and I'm going to cut it at a very steep angle here with my snips to create a pointed tip on my thread. I'm going to hold the thread in my right hand, and with my left finger, I'm going to slide it back behind the needle, down to the eye, very careful not to poke myself. And this does two things. This eliminates some of the static so that as I'm pushing the thread into the eye, it's not pushing the tip of the thread off to the side. And it's going to help me to see my skin through the eye of the needle, which is a little bit easier to see versus all of the shiny silver components. Once I've got the needle threaded, I'm going to make sure that the thread does not get wrapped around the needle any. And then I'm going to take this thread and I'm going to push it through the slit in the presser foot and underneath and let that tail hang out the back of the machine. Once you have your needle threaded, we're going to need to thread the bottom of your machine by inserting our bobbin into the bobbin casing. On a front load machine, you're going to remove this storage compartment to expose your free arm, and then you'll have some sort of door that's hinged that you can move out of place. And then in order to put our bobbin in, we're going to need to take the bobbin case out, and you'll see there is a lever here that locks it into place. When you pull on that, it's going to loosen it, and you can slide the entire bobbin case out. There are a couple things to notice about this bobbin. The first is this little finger. It lines up with a groove here to make sure that your bobbin case goes in the correct direction. There's the lever here that locks it and unlocks it. Here on the side, there is a tension clip that's going to hold your thread at the correct tension on the bottom. And then on this side, you'll see that there is this socket that goes around this center stud here so that your bobbin can rotate freely once it's inside the machine. Now on a front load machine, we're typically going to see that our thread is going to wrap clockwise. So my thread is coming off of the bobbin in a clockwise direction. And inside my machine, it actually indicates that as a reminder that that's how it goes into the bobbin case. I'm going to hold the bobbin in the case still with my thumb so it can't move. And I'm going to wrap the thread around until it slides into this groove. And then I'm going to gently pull it around this tension clip until I hear and feel a snap and the thread has snapped under that tension clip. I'm going to drape this thread to the left side of that finger, and there's nothing holding the bobbin in, so I'm going to pinch that so that the bobbin doesn't fall out. And then with the lever here, I'm going to insert that into the machine. And then sometimes you have to turn it to get that finger to line up in the groove. Push it firmly and let go of the lever, and now it's locked into place. Now that we have our bobbin installed, we need to get this bobbin thread up here into the sewing area of the machine. So to do that, we're going to find that tail from our needle thread. We're going to hold that tightly. And then with our hand wheel, we're going to turn it a complete rotation so that the needle goes all the way down, all the way back up, and then gently pull on this needle thread. And then you'll have to use some sort of tool that's slim enough to fit under the presser foot and swipe that out to the side. And you'll see here that our top thread has actually pulled our bobbin thread to the top of the machine. Now you always want to leave about a 4 to 6 inch tail here, so I'm going to trim this a little bit, but I've left these long tails. I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them out the back side of my machine, close this door up, and reinstall my compartment. Alright, let's take a look at this top load machine where the bobbin drops in from the working area. To start, we're going to turn our hand wheel until we see this take-up lever, and then we're going to install our upper thread, thread it through the thread path, and thread the needle. This process is going to be pretty much the same as on the front load machine. So we're going to put our thread on our spool. I'm going to go through the thread guide, between the tension discs, under the loop, up and over the take-up lever, back down to this thread guide, and then we're going to thread the needle. And then I will tuck my thread into the slit in the presser foot and pull that out the back. Now to insert our bobbin, we are going to, usually there is some sort of latch, or you can just pop this plate out. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to slide this out. I like to always set mine here on the machine because this clear plastic disappears very easily when you drop it on the floor. And you'll see here we don't have a bobbin case in the same sense as the other machine. This is sort of the bobbin case and shuttle built into one, and we do not have to remove this to insert our bobbin. So on this machine, you'll see it shows here on this plastic cover, the thread needs to wrap counterclockwise around the bobbin, and it's going to come out of a slit, around a tensioner, and back through a slit, and then it just trail off to the side out of this cover. So we want to orient it so that this thread is coming counterclockwise, and we're just going to drop it right in. And it just sits in there. And then there are two grooves here. I want to come all the way to the right, gently pull it so that it catches in that groove, and then wrap it back towards the back. And just like the picture shows, the thread is just going to trail off to the side. And then I'm going to reinsert this cover. And it's okay that the thread is trapped between the two because we're going to follow that same process to bring up our bobbin thread. I'm going to pull just a bit of tension on this top thread, and then turn my hand wheel one full rotation till the needle goes all the way down and all the way back up. And then when I pull on my top thread and gently run a tool underneath, you'll see that now my bobbin thread has come to the top of the machine and it's no longer caught there in that cover. I'll make sure that I have 4 to 6 inch tails of both threads and then push them towards the back of the machine.